Welcome to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. It is the Thursday 7 p.m. edition with Taylor and Steve. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Can't believe we're into October. We're moving along quickly to almost the half point of the NCAA season. Every week there seems like something new to talk about. But yeah, doing great. How about you guys?
I'm doing good. Taylor Swift is releasing her album tonight, so that's major news for the NFL fans around the world because she will not be attending the game in Jacksonville on Monday night. So good news for non-Chiefs fans. But my girlfriend's very excited about it, so I feel like I should mention that. Also, basketball season started today, so I'm rocking the Peyton Watson jersey, who you might not even know.
So speaking of Taylor Swift, my girlfriend and I are going to a Halloween party, and I came up with the idea that she can go as Taylor Swift, the life of a showgirl or whatever. So she can dress up like that, and then I can dress up as Travis Kelce. Now, the ironic thing is, so she works at the University of Cincinnati, but the University of Cincinnati has sold out of Travis Kelce Cincinnati jerseys, and we don't want me to have to buy a Chiefs jersey for one Halloween. So I have to go out and try to find a Travis Kelce University of Cincinnati jersey in the next 4 weeks. So that's as close as I can get to a Taylor Swift story. There are some Taylor Swift CDs on the wall behind me. But I think the last Taylor Swift CD I bought was 1989. So I probably haven't bought a CD in like 15 years. But we're here to talk about some linebackers that are going to be in the 2027 draft, the 2028, or the 2029. Now, a couple of 2026 names may sneak into this podcast because this is the first year they played. So one of the things we're going to try to do on this specific podcast is cover breakout players. But Steve, where do you want to go on the linebacker list first?
Where do you want to start, Chaw? You want to kick it off with a Terrapin by the name of Daniel Wingate?
Yeah, we can start with the ones that are on both our lists. Why don't you tell us about them?
Okay. So, first give you a little bit of the process involved because, here at the Draft Professor, we do like to be on the cutting edge. So that's why we're focusing on this, names. We want you to learn about the names before they're the names. So, start off with, the traditional rankings that come from very famous and often maligned company. And it was a very long list, sorting for 27 through 29 eligible linebackers. And I'm looking at the grades and, obviously you see your 80s, your 90s, and, my eyes are drawn to that. But then let's hypothetically say a guy, had a 85 grade in terms of his rush defense. But then I look over and see he only had like 6 snaps. I moved on. I wanted to see really a good amount that's already in the can. And for whatever reason, if they do get a lot of snaps, maybe it's because they've earned the role or, rotation or injury. But yeah, we're going to kick it off with Dan Wingate, Maryland Terrapins. 6'5", 230. I believe he's a junior. He's a local kid from Bowie, Maryland. Right now, he leads the Big Ten in tackles through at least through the 4 weeks of the season. He is their starting Mike linebacker under their defensive coordinator down there, Brian Williams, and he wears the green dot. So he is the dude. Through the 4 games of the 25 season, I have him down at 39 total tackles, 24 on his own, and 1 interception. Last year, he had 6.5 tackles for a loss. For his career, his numbers are good. Like I said, he's a local Maryland product. 6'5", that's really good height, right? Prototypical frame for a hybrid style linebacker. He flows very naturally. What I've seen to the ball, he anticipates and he moves quickly. His length, it can help him cover through the lanes, and he can handle the tight ends. Very solid for his run defense. His pass rush, he flashes occasionally. The games that I caught parts of were Michigan State, where, that was a good game for him. 11 tackles and 1 sack. Where I could feel he could continue developing is he really needs to develop more in terms of setting an anchor, especially against P5 linemen. If I had to give him a comp right now, because I'm not grading these guys yet, I'm looking at like a Jared Davis, an energetic, long kind of linebacker. Taylor, what do you got on Daniel Wingate?
Yeah, you said he leads the Big Ten in tackles. That also ranks 5th in the nation. So he's off to a really good start this year. He was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week last week. And that one interception that you mentioned was a return for a pick 6. So he has some athleticism for sure. I think that he needs to improve his hands at the line of scrimmage. You mentioned setting the edge, right? Like, I think that upper body strength is a challenge for him. But again, he's 6'5", 230. He's pretty lanky right now. So I'd like to see him put on some weight, and then maybe he can play a little bit more of that hybrid role. But yeah, wearing the green dot, I think he's kind of shows how good of a leader he is. And you mentioned the snap minimum. So with at least 200 snaps played on defense, he has the number 1 PFF grade among all linebackers. So that's a 90.3 grade. So he's on the field, he's playing, he's a leader, and he's dominating so far this season. One other caveat, his favorite pro athlete is Fred Warner. Pretty good guy to study if you're looking to be inside linebacker in the NFL. So I think he's someone that we will be talking about, this year or next year. He's eligible this year, but he's one of those guys that could sneak into this year. Kind of similar to, and I think we have to mention him here, Arvell Reese, right, from Ohio State. I think it's no doubt like he's a first rounder at this point. I know this is really the first year that he's playing, but he's absolutely dominating. He looked very good against Texas early in the season, and he hasn't really slowed up from that quick start. So Arvell Reese from Ohio State, 6'4", 245. He is an absolute menace. He is terrorizing backfields. He is so strong. He can just hold offensive tackles, offensive guards with one hand and just move them out of the way. So I think, he's one of the probably the more impressive linebackers I know in this class, and he's an underclassman, right? So, I know we're talking 27, 28, 29, but I don't think there's a question in my mind he'll go in the 2026 draft. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with you. We've spent a lot of time on this channel talking about another Ohio State linebacker by the name of Sonny Styles, and here we are not quite halfway into the season, and there's quite a bit of people, including Dane Brugler, that now has Arvell Reese surpassing Sonny Styles. And I think it's justified. I don't count my chickens before they hatch, so there's still a lot of games to go. But what he's putting together is just been phenomenal, especially, for me as a Buckeye fan. But, he's got great downhill burst on his run defense. He's twitchy and athletic. His instincts are so good, as a processor, and he's able to, just diagnose very quickly. Great closing speed. And yeah, in the games that we've seen, it's been pretty out there.
So you guys, that's 2 guys right there off the top. So I know when we were chatting last week about putting this episode together, this is exactly what I had in mind. So Daniel Wingate from Maryland, Arvell Reese from Ohio State to kick the show off. Those are great names to think about if your NFL team needs a linebacker this year or next. These are some names to watch, but we're not done. Who else do you have?
You want to go to the next guy we had? We had both had on the list. All right. Well, let's do Rasheem Biles here. Junior linebacker out of Pittsburgh, 6'1", 215. He was 3rd team all ACC last year as a sophomore. He had 82 tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. And in addition to that, he is regarded amongst Pitt as a special teams demon. I know we talked to fellow draft professor Bill Sparks in the chat the other day, and he gave him kind of a preferred free agent grade, which I think is about in line. I think, if his special teams tape, and I need to get my hands on that to watch that, is as good as it's, being regarded within the program, within the ACC. I think that he can easily sneak on into day 3 of either this year's class, but most likely next year's class, right? He is a true junior. So I think he will probably go back for another year and be in the 2027 talk. But I'm a big fan of Rasheem Biles. I like what I like what he does from the linebacker position, playing with another guy that Steve will talk about in just a second. I'm sure Braylon Lovelace. And then obviously you have, Lewis. Yeah, yep,
Cal
right
Lewis.
there. So they have a really good linebacking core. And I think that one thing about Biles, and I think this maybe speaks to his special teams demon, as they said on the site, he has a very, very high motor. Like, he's going to chase wherever the ball goes. He's chasing it through the whistle, out of bounds, down the field, 30 yards down the field, in the backfield. It doesn't really matter. He has really good penetration up the middle, especially timing on run blitzes. So I think there's a role for him in the NFL, especially as like a reserve linebacker, kind of third string linebacker, and then special teams. So I'm a fan of Rasheem Biles. I like his play style.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. You said it perfectly, that there's a role, because one thing that stands out when I was watching Biles is his versatility, right? So he can align in the box. They could put him in the slot or the apex. He really is, when you talk about a true hybrid role, a guy that fits that. He does fit that modern NFL sub linebacker. But you went over, the stats. He's a native of Pittsburgh. He did play both safety and linebacker in high school. And so, the development is there. I think they do list him in that star role, but I didn't put that down. But he has been used heavily in the nickel and sub packages. Randy Bates, who's the DC for the Panthers, for the Pittsburgh Panthers, really likes using him there. Overhang linebacker, in terms of slot coverage. I have him down so far for 14 solo tackles, 3 for a loss, 1 sack, couple of pass breakups. He got a sack against Cincinnati, West Virginia. I think I have it down as 9 tackles. But yeah, a guy who I really like and developing. I have him down, and Taylor, check me. I have him at 6'2", 210. I don't know if that's numbers.
That definitely sounds like a safety that's converted to linebacker.
Yeah, I have 6'1", 215. So in
Okay.
that range for sure. Yeah, that's what I have him listed as. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I did see what Bill Sparks said, but we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. But yeah, he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. And I'll touch about his running mate in a little bit, because I know we have another guy that you and I both agree on whenever you're ready.
Yeah, go for it. Tell him.
Right. Let's go. I just want to double check. We're talking Miles Graham of the Gators, correct?
Yep. Son of
Okay.
Florida legend running back Ernest Graham.
Right. Yep. I actually have another son of a legend that if there's time, I may cover later on. I've got Graham down at 6'1", 228. Yep, that's right. I added in my note, Ernest Graham, highly recruited, according to 247 Sports, a top 10 linebacker nationally. He's got the pedigree, albeit different position. He's got the football IQ, and he has the early production. We won't talk about Billy Napier too much. I'd rather focus more on the defensive coordinator, Austin Armstrong, but he's used as an off-ball linebacker, zone coverage duties. He's got the blitz responsibilities, and, he's aligned with Pup Howard as one of the younger, duos in the SEC. He's got good coverage. He's got good athleticism. Right now, and I find this with a lot of the guys that I was looking up, is right now their rushing defense is ahead of their pass or overall coverage. And that's how I feel about Miles Graham. Taylor, what do you got?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think he's a good run defender. I think he reacts really quickly. So it tells me, and again, son of a, former, legend, he's going to have a good knowledge of the game. It seems like it comes naturally for him, especially in like run fits. He knows exactly where to be and how to use his quickness to get under lead blocks, which is really impressive to me in the run game. The one thing I noticed about his pass defense is that whenever he's in zone coverage, I don't know if you notice this, he turns his back to the quarterback almost every time. And he kind of just like plays underneath the whatever, receivers, his responsibility in that middle kind of underneath zone. That's obviously going to have to change, right? Going to the NFL, you can't play with your back to the quarterback. I mean, you got guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, they're going to kill you if you're not looking at them. So that's one thing I'd like to see him get cleaned up, but I really love, his run defense, and I love the quickness that he plays with and the instincts to get in the backfield early.
Yep. What do you feel, given his stats now, and I have him down at 6'1" at around 225, is he a guy you'd like to see throw on some weight, or do you think he's good where he is?
Yeah, I think that was the common theme amongst, looking at some of these younger linebackers, a lot of them in the 6'1", 230 range. And that's just, something I'd like to see get up into the 240, especially, playing with such run defense first, run heavy, defensive like middle linebackers or off ball linebackers, whatever it may be. It's like in that coverage, you still need to see them, and they do look athletic and they move well. A lot of these guys do, and Graham's no different, right? He moves really quickly. I just think his technique and zone coverage really could be cleaned up. And other than that, I think, he's got the pedigree. He's got, I think he's built stoutly. Like, we'll talk about some of these other guys that are listed at 6'1", 228. They don't necessarily look like as firm and as stout as, Graham looks. So I thought, he looked a little bit, heavier, a little bit stronger than what he's listed as. So I would like to see him put him on. But if I'm being honest, watching the tape, it kind of looks like he already has it a little more than some of these other guys we'll talk about.
I got a question for you before we move on. What do you think about a comparison to Cody Barton of the Broncos?
I kind of like it. I think Cody Barton, if I'm not mistaken, is a little bit bigger, a little bit more like a slashing linebacker. I guess he's closer to like 6'2", 240. So yeah, if he puts on a little bit of weight and can play like that in the run game, I think then that's a pretty solid comparison. Yeah.
And going back to the size, I think for linebacker, I think the floor is like 225, right? Like if you're the Harold Perkins or the Suntarine Perkins of the world, where you're even sub 225, you're actually getting dinged. Even if your play stands out, just will your body hold up?
Yeah,
I think plenty of teams are starting 225 or 230-pound linebackers. I'd have to go look up what Matt Milano is and what Terrell Bernard is, but I don't think that and Miles Graham is small. I don't think he's smaller than Terrell Bernard. I don't think he's bigger based on what you described, but you need a defensive line in front of you that's going to protect you if you're going to play at that size. Were those the three linebackers that you guys had in common? Is that how you guys decided to start the show off?
Yep, pretty much. I remember I sent over a gigantic list of just some guys that I looked at PFF grades on, and then we kind of split off from there. And those were the three that we had in common. So where do you want to go next? Do you want to go as far out as 2028, 2029? Like start with the freshman. I know you're really excited about Luke Farrelly. If you want to talk about him.
Oh, I'm saving him because that's my manic episode of the week.
All right, then we'll get to the.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with. Okay, so what guys do you want? What do you think from guys that could declare this year? Is there anyone else that we're leaving out? Because I have one, other than Wingate, that I think can come out this year. Two, actually, maybe.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so first I'll start with Trey Lathan from Kansas. He's a redshirt junior. Again, another guy listed at 6'1", 228 pounds. He already has 2 sacks, 4 QB hits, 5 hurries this year. He is a guy that has nearly doubled his PFF grade year over year. He came over from West Virginia last year, and he plays for Kansas now, obviously, and he just dominated West Virginia. When they played 2 weeks ago, he had an interception. He had an 84.4 defensive grade, he had an 80 coverage grade. He is the leader of the KU defense, and he's became that leader over the last couple of weeks, so much so that the defensive coordinator was in the face of West Virginia's quarterback on the sideline, and he stepped in and pushed the coach away to avoid a penalty. So things like that really don't show up on tape, just some stuff that I read about when looking him up. And again, when you double your PFF grade, I mean, he was bad last year for a bad West Virginia team. 49.1 run defense, or total defensive grade. He has an 80 defensive grade right now, so he has increased it by quite a bit. He already has as many sacks as he had last year. He's missing tackles at a much lower rate, and he's also got the interception to show for it, and all of that was based on the film study from what I read and playing his former quarterback. So I really like what Trey Lathan's doing. Obviously, the KU defense isn't exactly, the pinnacle of good defense, and I'm saying that as a Kansas State fan, obviously. But I really like Trey Lathan. I think he's really he's one of those guys that just plays with a nice tenacity that you don't always see, like sideline to sideline motor. He's a good blitzer. I think the one thing, again, and it's kind of pointing to what Steve said earlier, pretty stiff in zone coverage, and he's a little undersized. So I'm seeing this with a lot of these linebackers. But he's very quick and he's very explosive, and I think that it's most likely a 2027 guy, but he is a redshirt junior, so he could declare this year, especially if he continues having as good of a year as he's off to.
Yep. I'm going to pick up. So I like that Brian's in the chat, because he and I had an interaction with each other on Twitter last night, along with somebody else, that there are guys, if their tape pops, they're going to pop, whether they're going, and I use the example, to Tarleton State or University of Texas. So I'm going back to the future. He's not eligible until the 2029 class. And I'm going to give you a little bit on Max Sanders, linebacker from Jacksonville State. Right. So in that size profile that we've been talking about, 6'2", around 225 pounds, 3-star recruit. He chose Jacksonville State, but he did have offers from Troy, UAB, and Georgia State. His earliest window is probably 2028, but I think he will more than likely be at 2029. With some of these guys, it's not really easy finding tape, right? Especially from the normal sources where, we would look at all 22, and he was definitely one of them. And the tape quality wasn't exactly the best. And, I'm squinting in front of the computer, like, is that a 0 on the jersey or a 7? I can't tell. But anyway, it was kind of funny. But through 5 games, Max got 26 total tackles, 9 solo, 1.5 tackles for a loss. His best game was just this past week against Southern Miss, where he had 13 tackles, 5 of them on his own. He had a pass breakup. He was, like I said, he was pretty well recruited. He had 3 interceptions as a senior last year. He's also a multi-sport guy. He played baseball, and when I turned on the tape of him, he was in places, he's showing really good signs of developing into a really good coverage linebacker. In terms of his rush defense, he's working from a true off-ball linebacker, standpoint in the 4-3. He's triggering downhill, he's scrappy, and he's scraping to the play. I mentioned the tackles for a loss back-to-back weeks. He's got the height. I would like to see him add a little bit of weight in terms of muscles, so that it doesn't, affect, it doesn't sacrifice the pursuit range. But yeah, he's definitely somebody that I think we'll be watching over the next couple of years. Just in terms of things that to work on as he develops over his college career is just finishing and the angles that he takes. But I could see him, in a Mike or a Will roll in a 4-3. Certainly he'll get onto a field probably with special teams because he adds value there. And in terms of a comp right now, I'd probably put Cole Holcomb from the Steelers. Just because the motor, Max Sanders is a little lighter, but it fits.
Yeah, I like that. I think that it's interesting that you brought up the Mike versus Will, because he played a game at Mike linebacker, and that's actually his best defensive grade, but he didn't start. So he's only started his last 2 games. So just another guy, again, maybe 29, but we're getting on him early here. And like I said, 2 starts. That's it for Max Sanders. So I'm excited to dig into his tape. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll just give you my top guy for 2029 as well, since we are kind of looking out into the future, and then I'll let you get into your boy Luke Farrelly. But I'll start, and you're gonna have to forgive me, I didn't have time to look this up. I have no idea how to pronounce this dude's name. Antoine DeLoris. I don't know how to pronounce it. To be honest with you, Syracuse linebacker, 6'1", 235 pounds. He is a true freshman, starting middle linebacker for Syracuse. He's ESPN's number 18 ranked linebacker prospect from Montreal, Quebec. He forced a fumble versus Clemson earlier this year, and right now he has the 12th best run defense PFF grade in the country. So he's playing really, really well for Syracuse right now, but he is amongst guys in the 2028 or 2029 classes. With 150 or more snaps, he has the 6th best PFF coverage grade as well. So not only is he good in run defense, but he's decent in coverage. I think that he is maybe not the most athletic linebacker that I've ever seen. He reminds me and is almost the same size as, and similar play style, in my opinion, to Josie Jewell. So he's a guy that's going to be around the football, a guy that's going to make tackles in the run game, and he's going to really dominate that way. De La Rey, there we go. Thanks, Brian. Yes, so he right now, to me, is like a guy, day 3, kind of similar to like Josie Jewell, where he's a really good run defensive guy, first and second down linebacker, and then he's not necessarily on the field a lot in third down situations or pass-only situations. So that's kind of where I'm at with De La Rey there. I don't know if you got a chance to look at him, Steve, or not, but he's one of the top guys I saw for 2028 or 2029.
Yep, he was on the list, but, then I start putting other guys together, and I figured –
I mean, in fairness to both of you, right, that list that the 3 of us compiled may have had 25 to 50 players on it. So, however, right, so other than me sharing the list with the 2 of you, and then you guys coming back a day or 2 before the podcast saying, here's who you watched and liked, and only 3 of the players that you watched and liked were in common, speaks to how many players were on the list and the independence by which each of you did your analysis. And that's what it's all about here. So I absolutely love that.
Yep. All right.
I'm sorry if I interrupted you there.
No. All right. So, for the audience, there's usually one player a week that I get overly excited about, and they practically have to disconnect my mic so that, I don't make them, struggle with hearing, like the Bud Clark safety out of TCU rather. All right. Tonight, the star of the show for me is going to be Luke Farrelly from Cal. He was one of the first ones that I pulled up tape on using the All-22. And it was awesome because this dude was everywhere. Number 44 in this play, number 44 in this play, number 44. His coverage skills, given how young he is, as long as he continues to develop, this guy is phenomenal already. He's from Murrieta Valley High School in California. He played both ways in high school. He played linebacker and tight end. So I guess who better to know how to cover the position? He decided on Cal because he liked the academic fit, and he liked Wilcox's history of defensive development. They also have a pretty good quarterback out there now in JKS. So we'll be watching both these guys. But under Wilcox and Sermon's scheme, he's more of an off-ball will, but he shifts to the middle when Cal goes to their odd fronts. His sideline to sideline is absolutely fantastic right now. Like I said, when I was watching the tape, he was just popping, in all corners of the screen. Against Arizona this year, 10 tackles, a sack. He had a forced fumble. Washington State, a tackle for a loss. Now a big thing with him was he got there and he was about 205 pounds, and he's now borderline. I think it's 230. I think I have him at.
Yeah, I saw
6'2",
6'3". Yeah, I've 6'3",
Okay.
230, but somewhere in that range. Yeah, he looks the part. He looks the part for sure.
Yep, but he's a smooth mover. Like I said before, his processing, his IQ, he's a disruptor. He knows how, to set. He's a good tackler. I mean, there was one particular play, I forget which game it was, that I specifically watched. I mean, he got to the receiver ahead of the corner and the safety. Now maybe that was a coverage breakdown, but for the purpose of this exercise, it was really good. I don't know if you had a chance to watch anything on Ferrelli. I think you did, but I do think by next year he's going to be the full-time Will starter there. And it's funny you brought up Josie Jewell, because that's my comp for him right now.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's interesting, because I thought that for Ferrelli specifically, his coverage was kind of where he was the most successful, and that's, I think, for Josie Jewell, maybe that's just me as a Broncos fan, allowing the Raiders and Josh Jacobs to get open every time that he goes one-on-one with Josie Jewell back in the day. But I liked Ferrelli from a coverage standpoint. I believe he has the #1 PFF coverage grade amongst all linebackers right now, including a game-winning interception in the end zone versus Boston College last week, or I don't know if it was last week, but whenever they played Boston College, he had the game-winning interception. Yeah, I guess it would be this last week. So yeah, 6'3", 230. Like I said, he looks the part. One interesting thing, he was a redshirt last year, and one of the redshirts that didn't take advantage of playing the 4 games. He did not play a down in 2024. So this is all for the first time that we're seeing Luke Ferrelli, and he's making these big plays. He's all over the field and he's popping on tape. So definitely a name to watch. And it sounds like he might be, kind of fixture for that Cal defense for the next 2 or 3 years, while the quarterback, and I forget the acronyms even at this point.
JKS.
JKS.
Jaron Kayave, and now I forget his last name.
Yeah. And that's a team on the rise. They could be on the rise, right? Especially playing in the ACC. It's an interesting, and he's played every single game at Mike linebacker as well. And it looks like he started. So, I like everything I've seen from Luke Ferrelli. I just knew you wanted to talk about him, so I didn't look at him too much. Let's get into the South Carolina linebackers, because we each had a different one written down. So I will start with my guy, Fred J.R. Johnson, linebacker, number 0 for South Carolina. He is a guy that played in all 13 games last year as a true freshman. Obviously didn't start because Demetrius Knight, right? 2nd round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals, and he was the direct backup to Demetrius Knight. So couldn't imagine a better guy to learn from, right? A 2nd round pick the previous year. For Fred, and I don't know, it's listed as Jay capital R on their website. So I'm assuming he goes by JR. I do believe there's another Fred Johnson on South Carolina, potentially, which is interesting to say, or as a former one. He showed up in PFF as 2 Fred Johnsons for South Carolina. Anyways, 6'3", 244 pounds. He was an all-state tight end in high school. Again, he's another guy that is not going to be, ready to declare until 2027 or 2028. But he's looking like the next guy up in a long list of South Carolina linebackers to make it to the NFL. Like you said, he's kind of a freak. They list him on their site as someone with massive potential, and I definitely see it, right? 6'3", 244. I mean, you have to believe in the Demetrius Knight range of comps, right? He's a similar size to the linebacker that went in the 2nd round. So I could definitely see him being a day 2 pick in 2027 or 2028. At linebacker, he's very, very athletic. He plugs run gaps with intensity, which I think is underrated amongst linebackers. I will say he's another guy that's not super savvy in zone coverage, right? But he has really good instincts when he's spying the quarterback as well, which is important, obviously, for some of these like longer, rangier linebackers that could be potential hybrids, right? They're going to have to, guard some of those quarterbacks in one-on-one situations. And I thought he did a really nice job of that. So I'm excited to see the development of Mr. Fred J.R. Johnson. I think he's really, really talented. Wearing number 0 out there for South Carolina. You can't miss him. But I know you liked Justin Okoronkwo. So I'll let you talk about the other South Carolina inside linebacker.
Yeah. So to the viewers, if the name sounds familiar, it's for 2 reasons. So he just transferred into the Gamecocks ahead of this season. He spent 2 years at Alabama, and his brother was in the draft a few years ago. It's got to be maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago now. And Agbo, they call him. I forget his given name, but they come from Munich, Germany, and that's another thing. We see Roger Goodell really want to move the NFL more to the international thing. We've got the games over the next few weeks in the United Kingdom, but Germany is another spot. He's coming from the American football scene. And remember, we've talked about Michigan tight end Marlon Klein, who comes from Cologne, Germany. So here comes Justin Okoronkwo, 6'3", 231, from Munich. Like I said, he played for Alabama the last couple of years. He was considered a top international prospect. Now, in comparison to the guy Taylor just talked about, Okoronkwo is more of a developmental guy. Okay, so he's the ones you watch to see, can he put it together and make it to an NFL roster? The early signs are there, certainly with that SEC, I think, pedigree. But let's see. In terms of Alabama, he just wanted to come over for an expanded role. He's got a good football IQ, certainly picked up on it there. Ideal build, in my opinion. The athleticism is there. He's got good straight line speed. It's the lateral where he flows, but he's definitely more in terms of the straight line. He needs to learn to stack and shed, more consistently. His pattern recognition has been pretty good, but obviously it needs to develop. He definitely has the length to disrupt in the passing lanes. He's reliable as a tackler, and I just like his motor. So you see a guy who's smart and he's got a good motor. In terms of refinement, obviously with a lot of these guys, and we've mentioned it, building on core strength and being able to handle the situations where they're facing, double teams and anticipating the routes. So for right now, I think he's more of a developmental guy with the Gamecocks, but there are definitely NFL traits. I see him probably in a no, I think maybe more in a will role, but he's definitely going to be able to contribute on special teams, sub packages. He's got tools. In terms of a comp, I'd probably put Cole Holcomb was the first one I watched a little bit. Did you get a chance to watch any when you were watching his running mate?
Yeah. I saw some in there, and I definitely see the potential, right? He's definitely developmental, in my opinion. I thought he right now has average speed and average play strength. And I think especially in his lower half, right? Like I'd like to see him get stronger in his lower half to be able to drive through tackles and, push, pulling guards, back into, the run fit, as that is his, role within, stuffing the run. I think he does have good IQ. I have him listed with a very quick first step in the run game. And to me, that speaks to the good IQ, right? He knows where to go. But again, he's pretty lean right now in his frame. So you hit it on the head when you said he's a developmental guy, only a true sophomore, obviously coming over from one true freshman season at Alabama. But I definitely like the future of the South Carolina linebacking core. That is for sure. Do you want to go to some guys that could declare for 2026 or 2027, or do you want to go further out to 27, 28? Because I have 3 or 4 guys for both.
No reason to match each other. Talk about the guys
just run with it, because run with it. I want to make sure I talk about Brian's guy, Sammy Brown of Clemson. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just talk about let me see here. Let's talk about Xavier Atkins, sophomore linebacker from Auburn. He is 6 foot, 210 pounds is what I have him listed as. which it does seem pretty small, right? But he transferred over from LSU to have an expanded role within, the defense, right? So he right now leads Auburn in tackles with 29, and he ranks second in the SEC. So he is a tackling machine. 3 sacks. He has a forced fumble. He has an interception. He's been all over the field for Auburn all year. And I think that with the way that Auburn is kind of, their defense is obviously led by Keldrick Falk, right, who's projected to be a top 10, top 15 pick. But in my opinion, the underrated, kind of hero of this defense so far has been Xavier Atkins. I know that he's undersized, and I know there's going to be questions about that. But I think his, motor to the football, I think that from everything that I've read within Auburn, and I know it's probably just coach speak, but everything I've heard is that he is a, technical masterpiece, or he wants to have, he wants to master his technique in terms of, every single little detail. He's a football kind of, he lives, eats, breathes, sleeps football, right? So everything about that tells me he's going to have a good career, even though he is a little bit undersized and can hopefully play a little bit of a hybrid role within a defense in the NFL, or just be a menace on special teams, which I'm sure he would be fit for that role as well. So I'm excited about Xavier Atkins. I believe he's coming off by far his best game of the season. I think he had like 10 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, and an interception in the game on September 27th. So that is where I'm at on Xavier Atkins. He's one of my favorites. He's a 4-star linebacker. And again, I think he has all the potential to rise up boards for 2027, but most likely 2028.
Okay.
Steve, what do you got next?
Yeah. So Brian brought him up and he was on my short list. I'm going to go to Sammy Brown from Clemson. I have him at 6'2", 235 pounds from Jefferson, Georgia. Dude was a track athlete. Right. So that always comes in handy. And multi-sport. He did wrestling as well in high school. Physically advanced, and he's very refined, for his age. He's, I believe, a 2028 guy. No, he could be 2027. But rotating at starter in the will role alongside Barrett Carter, in Goodwin's defense. He has been used as a 3-down defender, both in the box, as well as out in space. And he's got very good early down potential, through 5 games. I only have him down as 1 sack, but 3.5 tackles for a loss, 14 solo tackles. He was a 5-star prospect, and he was recruited by Georgia and Alabama and the Ohio State University. But he chose Clemson for the immediate role and, the linebacking tradition, right? You look at Jeremiah Trotter and Simpson, those guys. Let's getting into the traits on him. He's got great burst. There's definitely verified athletic traits on him. He accelerates quickly, closes ground, doesn't make a lot of false steps. He's compact in his rushing defense. He's able to control his leverage and he fills the gaps. I talked about, I think, his range, boundary to boundary. He's got good long pursuit. Processing, his IQ, well, that's going to continue to develop, especially on the post-snap reads. But, he flashes in terms of, his instincts. And like a lot of these guys, you want to see him refine his shedding of the blocks, continue building his recognition post-snap and developing some patience when it comes to play action. But I definitely think Sammy is a guy we're going to be talking more about. I was stuck on a comp for him. There were elements of Jack Campbell for the Lions, and I think more so David Long Jr. of the Dolphins, although he's shorter and more compact. But I think he is a 3-down linebacker that we're going to be talking about a lot over, the next year on the channel. Taylor, what do you got, if anything, on Sammy?
I didn't look at Sammy. I know he's a 5-star recruit. I know he's highly touted. So I didn't dig into his stuff too much, but I've watched, Sammy Brown at Clemson. He's one of the bright spots on that defense right now. Honestly, a team that's been reeling most of the year. Not got as much production out of the defensive line as they would have hoped. So Sammy Brown's been a nice addition. I think I'll stick with the 2028 class. Let's go with Vincent Shavers Jr. Out of Nebraska. So 6'1", 225 pounds. He is a true sophomore. He was the highest graded true freshman linebacker in college football in 2024. I also really like that. I don't like Nebraska, so I don't necessarily know why I like this so much, but he flipped his commitment from Miami to Nebraska on signing day. He's pretty much been playing ever since he stepped foot on campus at Nebraska. But to me, he's an impact player. He's up there with Xavier Atkins as one of my favorite guys that I've seen from 2028. He hits hard. He flies downhill. I do think one thing that can be improved is when he's blitzing, I think he lacks any sort of pass rush move. So he kind of just gets to the guard or the tackle and just kind of, does a little hand jockeying and isn't really doing much to get past the guard. So when he's blitzing, but I thought he's solid in zone coverage. I think he has above average play strength and recognition. And right now, of all guys for the 2028 draft class, he is number 2 in PFF coverage grade with an 89. So I think he moves really fluidly. Obviously 6'1", 225 pounds. You expect him to move a little bit more like a safety, right, than a guy that's 6'2", 6'3", 250 pounds playing linebacker. So I am not sure if he right now is a 3-down linebacker, if he's just someone that's going to be like a nickel dime sort of linebacker, or if he's going to put on some, mass. But I like the way that he plays, with a good tenacity and like want to go get the football. So I'm a big fan of that. And you saw that as a true freshman last year, obviously highest graded true freshman linebacker in the country. So I like Vincent Shavers Jr. quite a bit from Nebraska. Did you get a chance to look at him, Steve?
Nope, because figured anybody you were covering, I was going to go in a different direction outside of Farrelly because you and I tend to always wind up on the same guys, so I didn't.
Do you have any other guys for like 2028 class, or do you want to get into the guys that are 2027 that could potentially even come out in 2026?
Why don't we do them, because that'll be next year's class, or even worst case this year, right?
Lead us off, Tay. What do you got?
All right, let's start with one that is the most obvious and looks the best in my opinion in that white and yellow Oregon uniform, and that's Jerry Mixon. One of the last guys you'll see wearing a traditional linebacker number. He's number 54. None of this single digit. This is no nonsense from Jerry Mixon, right? So I think he's very instinctive linebacker, really, really good in zone coverage. And I think one of his best traits is how well he times his run blitzes. If you watch the Northwestern tape, he had 2 plays there on 3rd and short, I think both of them. He split the A gap and just went right to the running back or right to the quarterback. I think he's one of those guys that is a very fluid mover as well, like I said, especially in coverage. But he's going to go sideline to sideline. And again, he's a true junior, so he's eligible for this year's class. 6'2", 230 pounds. I am a big fan of what Jerry Mixon brings to the table at Oregon. Did you get a chance to look at Mixon at all, Steve?
Yeah, and there's nothing I could add. You hit it on the head, and as you very curious to see what happens, right? Because they've got Mendoza this week, right?
Yep,
I think. So we're going to see, but he popped on the Penn State tape. He
already has 2 interceptions this year as well. So you can see the savviness in coverage just already.
Yep. All right. Another junior for me. And I know you follow these guys. So let's go with Austin Romaine. He's a junior for the Kansas State Wildcats. I've got him at 6'1", 235 pounds, used primarily as a box defender. He'll do rotational sub snaps in the short zones. He's old school. If you watch him, he brings that physical, menacing demeanor, into the modern scheme, that they're running now. He is eligible, but I do expect he will go back. just for the further development. But he was a multi-year team captain in high school. He played football. He played wrestling. He was a baseball player. He went to K-State and he redshirted in his first year. He was rotational last year and he's starting now. He's mature, intellectually, developmentally as a player. So he really fits in with that culture along with his toughness. He's very decisive as a downhill run defender. Excellent gap integrity, and leverage through the contact. He knows how to identify zone schemes quickly. He's a good communicator. He's like a traffic cop in a can of worms, right? Directing traffic. And he's in terms of his tackling as a form, he's pretty good. I watched what I could of the Oklahoma State game. He did have a forced fumble. He had I forget if 1 or 2 tackles for a loss, 11 total. And, just he needs to add some lateral burst as well as recovery speed to his repertoire. Needs to focus on his anticipation, and just being fluid, more fluid in coverage. But yeah, he'll definitely be somebody that like I said, I don't think he's going to do this cycle. Maybe he does, but I would rather him go back to K-State for another year and fit in with that. So he either, makes his mark as a Mike linebacker in a 4-2-5 or interior in a 3-3-5, for those that use it. But he definitely, I don't know how high his ceiling is, but I do think he's got a high floor. Maybe he's a day 3 guy, very late. If he comes out this year, I kind of lead towards PFA, but maybe next year, we are talking about him early on, a late Friday pick or an early Saturday.
Yep, I would agree with that. I actually have a different K-State linebacker on my list. So right now the starting linebackers, Austin Romaine and Desmond Purnell, who is a senior. So Desmond Purnell's been a starting linebacker at K-State for 3 years. But this year K-State, I shouldn't say we, I don't work there anymore. K-State got a linebacker transfer from Ohio State named Gabe Powers. Gabe Powers is 6'3", 237 pounds. He is not someone I expect to come out in 2026. I actually expect Romaine to go back and be, starting linebackers with Gabe Powers next year, and both of them declare in 2027. But Gabe Powers was the 2021 Ohio Gatorade Player of the Year. Like I said, transferred from Ohio State. He has missed 0 tackles so far. The only issue with him right now is he is stuck behind 2 very good linebackers in Austin Romaine and Desmond Purnell. Desmond Purnell, not necessarily someone that's going to be in NFL radars, but he's a very, very, very good college linebacker. But he has, he's had his best game of the year versus Army, where he saw nearly double the amount of snaps that he's had in any other game. So really the only thing holding Gabe Powers back is his opportunity. He had an 81 PFF grade in the Army game, which was the only game that he played in. So I am a fan of Gabe Powers. I think that, like I said, what's holding him back right now is playing time. But he's, like I said, 6'3", 237. He's very fluid in zone coverage, but he's got like this long and lean frame that can put on weight. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for Gabe Powers, and hopefully he'll get some more reps as the year goes on and he learns the defensive playbook. Coming over from the national championship, Ohio State Buckeyes. And then, okay, so I'll go last guy for the 2026 that I think could declare in 2026, and I don't think really anyone's talking about him because of how good his counterpart, Jacob Rodriguez, has been. And that's Ben Roberts, Texas Tech linebacker, 6'3", 240 pounds. Right now he has an 88.2 PFF tackle grade, which is one of the best in the country. Another guy that has missed 0 tackles this year. Obviously, Jacob Rodriguez is playing at a level that could win the Bronco Nagurski. It could win several, the Bednar. Like, Rodriguez is the dude there in Texas Tech, don't get me wrong. But Ben Roberts has been very, very solid in that supplementary other linebacker role. He was the 2023 Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. So, again, this to me is a guy that has the potential to come out in 2026 with how well he's playing, but is most likely going to be a 2027 guy. So I like what I've seen from Robertson. Let me get my scouting notes on him specifically. He is
Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year.
Yep, in 2023. So I thought one of the things I noticed about him is that he's really good laterally, whether that's scraping down the D line and trying to find the running back in the backfield, or even when they were flipped it out for a wide receiver on a screen, he was the first guy there. So I like Ben Roberts. I like what he can bring to the table, and he has the size to be a linebacker in the NFL. Well, I think that's all for me. I have a couple other guys that I quickly talk about. I guess Kevon Sherman from Toledo is another name to watch from a G5 standpoint. He transferred from Hutch Community College, which Alvin Kamara also went to Hutch Community College, so shout out. And then Elijah Hardy, who's a sophomore linebacker from Indiana, going to be a 2028 guy. My favorite part about Elijah Hardy is his family military background. He went to Naval Academy Prep School. His sister plays basketball at Army. Brother plays football at Navy. And I think he's one of those guys that's going to grow into his frame. He's 5'11", 225. I expect that to get closer to 240. I mean, he has the ability to fill out that frame, and I like what he's bringing to Indiana's defense. So those are just two other guys that I wanted to touch on really, really quickly. But anyone else you want to look at, Steve?
Yeah, the last guy I'll bring up, because we brought up his running mate before, Rasheem Biles. I'll just give a little bit on Braylon Lovelace, one of the other linebackers for the Pittsburgh Panthers. So yeah, he's in the room with Biles as well as Kyle Lewis. Braylon I have him at 6'2", 225. He's very high motor, explosive young linebacker. Call him the money linebacker with a high upside as a full-time starter. He's already produced both, as a run defender as well as a situational pass rusher. This year, I've got him at 15 solo tackles, 1 sack, 3.5 tackles for a loss. He had 4 sacks last year and 1 interception. And that was it. For his career, he's at 5 sacks and the 1. He did have a fumble recovery for a touchdown. That was 2 years ago in 2023. He committed early to Pitt, as a relatively local kid, and quickly earned the rotational snaps, in the aggressive blitz heavy defense. We talked about it before. He is known for his energy, his ability to disrupt in the backfield. He wraps up strong when it comes to tackling, gives a pop on contact. I mentioned his motor. Good game where I picked up most of my film on him was from last year against Syracuse. Louisville. That's where he had the interception touchdown, 33 yards. But he still needs to add a little bit of lower body strength and refine his discipline, and just he needs more arrows in his quiver as far as his pass rush variety. Add some counters, besides that burst on the first step. But he's right now a rotational linebacker is his floor, and a very athletic 3-down linebacker, with explosive speed as a ceiling. I think of guys like an Alex Anzalone, very smooth moving, very smart. So, that may be an aggressive comp, but that's who I came up with. But yeah, we covered a lot of names.
You guys just took an idea I had and you guys hit it out of the park. Steve, why don't you tell everybody about your Jets podcast and all the other draft content that you do?
Well, it's NFL in general. It is centered around the Jets because nothing sells better than bad news. And, we can always rely on the Jets a little bit for that. So business is booming right now. But y'all, you can find me on Twitter at Steve SWFL. That's also how you find my YouTube channel. Do a lot of stuff with the other draft professors and do an NFL preview show each week. Talk a little about the college games. And then, as I alluded with my humor, when you're a Jets fan, you start doing your mock drafts while they're in training camp. So we have a lot of Jets topics going on, being joined on Saturday with the Star We Are podcast to preview the Cowboys game. And that's how you find me. Taylor, how do people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on X handles down there somewhere. And then you can find me on my blog too, footballwithshaw.com. I cover a lot of, I honestly just pick the games for fun and then cover some random things that I get excited about. A lot of tape over on X when I can. And I'm a big stats guy. So you're going to get a lot of statistical information out of me, but that is how you can find my stuff. Also, Football with Shaw on YouTube. So I plan on expanding that channel once I can decide what my profile picture is going to be. So go ahead, Jen.
Cool. Well, next week, these guys are doing corners for 2027, 2028, 2029. So Brian Galvin, I want to say you brought it in the chat. Ryan Sparks, I think I saw you stop by too. You guys are awesome for stopping by the chat. So ultimately, this is Draft Professor. We are covering the draft like no other channel. So there's 2 podcasts every week that are focused on the next draft class. Every other podcast is focused on this draft class. Starting on Monday, every podcast on the channel is going to be breaking down positions for the upcoming draft class. So you'll see defensive line Monday. You'll see wide receiver Tuesday. You will see corners on Wednesday. You will see running backs on Thursday. You will see tight ends and corners again on Friday. And then we will have a Saturday and a Sunday podcast that are ramping up. We just got to wait for some people to get back from vacation. So with that being said, Stephen Taylor, round of applause to you guys. You guys took an idea I had, and the toughest job ever is to make me look good. So thank you so much. But for Taylor, Steve, myself, for the 98 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you on a podcast again in 55 minutes where EJ and Andrew will do Draft a Team. Thank you.